All right, so when you hear the word fundraising, what comes to mind?
Money.
Money. What else?
Relationship.
Relationships. What'd you say? Donors, right?
Donor data.
Donor data. Oh, that's how I started in fundraising, was donor data. So I still have a love of that. Yeah. So sometimes when we ask that question, people have all these different ideas about fundraising. I've actually had one gentleman that held on to his wallet and said, "You're just here for my money." I'm like, "No, that's not how this works. We're doing it wrong if that's what we're doing." But all of you are very important in the fundraising piece, and the marketing communications has a big role with that as well. So we'll just go ahead and move forward. I always think this is important. We work with a lot of boards over at Let's Build Hope, and that's part of the piece we're going to touch on at the very end of our talk today. But sometimes folks don't know where the money comes from or how we should have relationships with donors, and they really are people, right? I mean, we are people. We're not ATMs. We're not putting a card in and spitting money out. That's not how all this works. So we're really after people's hearts and not their money. We think that the money will follow when their heart is into it. So tell me how you're building your fundraising projections right now and successful with fundraising and the role of marketing communications. Who wants to answer that? How are you building your projections now? Anyone? It's at that time of the day, everyone's like, no, we're checking out for a little while. All right. Do you feel like your programs, your fundraising programs are being successful right now? You feel like you're raising enough money? Are there some struggles in there? Are there some concerns? Have things started to shift? Did things shift during COVID also? Maybe things went up, maybe things are going back down. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that we feel like more of our donors are aging out and passing away than we're bringing in.
Yes.
So our donor database is shrinking.
Yep, and that might be the case with some of the religious groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
We're in the same situation.
Yeah, with donors that are passing away that have been connected for a long time. I saw that a lot when we worked with the religious clients, because the donor base tended to be older than younger, so a lot of passing away are in nursing homes and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a Blackbaud webinar last week actually, and they said that 2022 was like the worst year for fundraising.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that you can't even compare it to the 2 years of COVID because you're comparing like apples to oranges, because those were like such special circumstances.
Yeah.
And it said like it's the worst year they've seen since the housing.
Yeah, the housing, yeah, the
2008. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 2022 was the worst year that they've seen.
Yeah, last year, if you're not following Giving USA every year, they come out with a report at the end of June, early July with the updated numbers, and the fundraising numbers did go down last year. It's the first time in a long time they've seen that. Usually they go up. During COVID, people were worried about that. They actually kept climbing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other resources, a lot of money. I don't know about you. I wasn't spending any money. I was just at home with my kids, right? So I had more money to give away because I just wasn't going places. So, but last year there was a dip. Last year, 08, 09, housing bubble. That caused some issues also. We were concerned about that in 9/11, but 9/11 took a dip and then came right back up. So hopefully this year will be a little bit of a better year. So we're going to talk at the end about some fundraising projections and that sort of thing. But at Let's Build Hope, when we're working with clients, we always talk about three main pieces. The case for support, the why, where I'm going to spend most of the time today. Annual planning, the how. Sometimes people don't know how to set projections or they're not sure how to actually back into that information. And I'm going to leave the last piece for gas in the car, that's the board. And for you in the room, it might be your leadership team or what have you. So it might look a little different from an outside board. So they're the gas in the fundraising car though. All right, so here are the three pillars. Anyone ever heard the term active fundraising? Anyone ever hear the post and hope? We're going to post something and just hope money comes in. Right? Does that work? No, rarely does that work, all right? Unless you've got something really compelling that you're posting about. So we're always going to be active. Come on in, yeah, come on in. So we're always going to try to do some active fundraising and not be passive. We're not going to post and just hope the money comes in. That's typically not how it happens, all right? Oh, I'm okay. Okay. Oh, nothing to see here. Just rolling. Are you okay?
I am. Sorry, no, I'm good.
That is a story for the mission.
All right. So we want to make sure our fundraising strategies are dovetailed with all of our marketing communications. Have you ever looked at your information that's coming out of your organization and you're doing fundraising, your communications looks like something else, your programs look like something else, and it doesn't look like it all hangs together, right? You ever throw that all out on the table and go, oh, something seems off, something's black and yellow and everything else is purple and green, right? So we want to make sure everything's dovetailed together for our nonprofit to make sure that great things can happen. Who's got a case for support right now? A written case for support? No one? No case for support at all?
Well, remember, some of us are marketers. We're not. We're not the mission advancement
All right, well,
people.
we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. When I was started in fundraising, I stopped counting at 25 years because I figure, who cares at 25 years? I mean, I'm old enough to do this stuff. But when I started in fundraising, I didn't know about a case for support. I didn't see one. No one explained it to me. I was several years into fundraising before I actually saw one, and my first thought was, why didn't someone tell me that? That would have made this a lot easier, right? So we're going to spend some time talking about the case for support, and it's really the why you're raising money for your organization. I'm going to give you some ideas on how to do that. It has to be written. Sometimes people go, oh, we know why we're raising money. It's all in my head. You know what I call that? The milk truck, where someone wins the lottery. Anyone win the lottery? Anyone from California? That's who won the lottery last night. Someone's very wealthy this morning. But you don't want things in your head because if something happens or goes sideways, you've lost all that information. So it has to be documented, it has to be written. And it really justifies why you're raising money, and you want to get very specific. How many sisters, how many programs, how many people serve, all of that. And oftentimes we see case for support for capital, but not for the annual fund. The annual fund is the hardest dollars to raise. Capital sometimes is the easiest because we can do a renovation or show a building or show the bricks, but all the other stuff that we're doing every day is the hard dollars to raise, right? Because we got to keep the lights on, we got to keep people employed, we need to pay for our programs, we need to pay for the sisters that are retired, all of that, right? And no one's got an annual fund case for support? Go ahead.
I think she works in the development office and I work in marketing communications for Port Handmaid's of Jesus Christ. And
Oh, I know that.
I've been there- Yeah, I've been there for 8 years and she is relatively new with us, but for the last, I think it's 3 now, we have done an annual gift catalog, much like Cover International.
Oh, sure.
Supports several ministries in the U.S. and then all of the provinces and regions around the globe. And it's been pretty successful. You know, our department, not myself per se, well, with some of the copy editing is me, but then we design it and, you know, create the website graphics, the social media graphics, and their department, you know.
All right. Yep, I've seen that before. Planet International has one also. They fund mostly girls around the world. And you could buy a bathroom for the girls, you could pay for their classrooms, you could buy chickens for their family or cows or what have you, and you kind of look through the catalog and it's got different dollar amounts associated with that. Yep, is that what you're talking about? Yep. Go ahead.
So how would you use your case for support? Because obviously when we do an appeal, we're giving
I'm gonna tell you all
our
about that.
reasons why to support in
Yes.
the letter,
Yes.
but like where would you even use your case for support?
I use it for everything. I use it for the letters, the website, social media, any online campaigns. We do a lot of those now.
So
All that stuff.
incorporate it into the
Oh,
letter?
I use it in everything, yes. And I get very specific on dollar amounts. I call them the wonky numbers. I don't just say, give us 25 or 50 or 500. Nothing costs that. So I dig down to figure out what those real costs are with the overhead and put that into the case for support.
You create a new case for support like every year?
I take a look at it every year. Usually when you have a solid case for support, it's good for 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And then you have to look at it every year just in case something changes or there's no longer a program or it really grows. But I take a look at it every year. Usually by year 3, you want a different theme, a different feel to that. But I'm going to get into this good question. I'm going to get into that in just 1 second.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. All right, so it's really your organizational script. Sometimes we say it's singing out of the same hymn book. Anyone ever been with someone at your organization or outside and they start talking about your organization and you're like, whew, nope, not at all what we do. Nope, we don't have that ministry, right? I've been there many times. I was with a board member several years ago. We were working with a client here in St. Louis, and he starts talking to this potential donor about programs we have in Las Vegas. We don't have any programs in Las Vegas. So how do you stop a board member who's telling that? You know, it was really awkward to say, oh, I think you got us confused, and then we try to clean it up, right? So don't always assume that what you know about your organization, other people know. Volunteers sometimes, I don't think they intentionally make things up, but sometimes they do because they just don't know. So that'll help get them on the same page. Sometimes I create a FAQ at the back that I hand out to people, or a little note card that go in their purse or their wallet, so they have some of the highlights and that sort of thing. It'll also give us some language to use on all the documents. All right, so I'm not recreating the wheel every time I'm doing something on the website or the annual report, or I'm at the gala and I'm doing funding need, any of those sort of things. So I'm pulling it all from the case for support, and it gives us a clear understanding of all the financial needs of the organization. And I don't call them financial needs publicly, I only use that privately. When I'm talking with donors, I talk about funding opportunities. Sometimes donors don't like that word need. They think that we did something wrong. Oh, you need something? Well, no, we're just trying to, we have a regular budget like everyone else. We're just trying to stay within it. So sometimes I'll say funding opportunity instead of need. All right, so how do we actually write the case? So all of you in the room, if you've not been part of a case session, you might want to ask when you go back about that, because you need the right people around the room. Your program, your finance, board, leadership, development committee, whoever that leadership is, your CEO or executive director, whoever that might be, and then your development and marketing teams all around the table. We usually do case sessions over one day. Sometimes they take more than one day. And we literally sit around the table with a session guide and go through every way we're going to raise money and how we're going to actually get to those numbers over the next year and how we're going to talk about the organization. And I do that every year with organizations because things always change. All right, so you got to have the right people around the table. And then use your budget as the guide. First thing I always ask the leadership is, what do we have to pay for? And then they pretty easily can say, we need to pay for the sisters, or these ministries, or the properties, or facilities, or we have this program. So what do we need to pay for? How do we best include the overhead in our ask? Has anyone ever done an ask for donors on overhead? You ever done that? I did that early on in my career. It did not go over well. Because donors don't want to pay for the lights. They don't want to pay for the cars usually, unless the cars are doing something really cool and moving people from place, you know, like for their programs or what have you. So we like to take all of the operating and smash it down into the ask. Go ahead.
That was a question I asked in the session this morning.
Okay.
Was I asked them, like, well, really we're using it to pay for the retired sisters and their living expenses. Yep. And they said, oh yeah, you should be very transparent about what you're using it. So like, oh, paying the electric bill and all that. But
well, I might not say electric bill, but yeah, I would say we're helping to pay for, we've got 28 sisters in the mother house, and on average it costs $28,167 a year, which comes to X number a month, and then I break it down like that. And then oftentimes they'll say, what does that include? And I say, full freight, all in. And then usually they get it then. Yeah.
So that would be like what you're saying, it didn't go over well?
Well, if I asked just for overhead. When I was a baby fundraiser, I did that. And I was like, well, we need a new office, and we need stationery, we need all that. And donors were like, what are you talking about, right? So once I understood how to get that language around that and do the ask, it made it a lot easier.
You mean for the office?
Yeah.
Not for the overhead costs of the sisters?
I look at the budget, and I take all the overhead, and I smash it down where it needs to go. Because what's overhead? It's us, right? We're the overhead. We're the biggest part of overhead. But what doesn't happen if we're not here? Then the sisters and ministries and anything else don't get funded. So donors don't oftentimes want to just fund individuals, but they understand if we're not here doing all the work, what's going to happen. So that's why I take that overhead and smash it down. I'll also ask what's compelling, all right? Sometimes I'll ask what's not compelling. I worked with, for a while with a group here in St. Louis called Provident Behavioral Health. And Provident answers almost 100,000 hotline calls a year. The majority of those are suicide prevention hotline calls. During COVID, those numbers, like as you can imagine, just blew out of the water. But they also answer calls for other things, like gambling addictions and other addictions, right? That's a small part of what they do. But when we wrote that in the case for support, we touched on it for seconds. But when we talk to donors, that's just a piece of what they do. We talk about what most of the time the money is going to. So we have some language around there. Because we ran it by the donors, and the donors are like, I love everything else, but I don't want to pay for some gambling addiction. They felt like that was, someone was making a choice, they want to pay for that, all right? So you have to figure out some language around there. What's already funded and what's not. If things are already funded, I still put it in the case for support, and I'll say, we're fortunate that this is fully funded. So if you get money from like NRRO or one of those other organizations that is paying for something, fantastic, I'd say that in the case for support also, all right? That gives the donors some confidence that what you're doing is right, and the money they give to you is going to be helpful for whatever you need, all right? I always look for some kind of theme. So an anniversary year, a lot of the sister groups have been a long time, so 125 years, 150, 200 years. what are the next so many years hold? So if you've got a really cool thing that's gonna happen in 5 years or 10 years, I'll roll that into the case for support as well. Sometimes the leadership will have some sort of exciting vision for the future, and we want the donors to participate in that, so I drop that information into the case for support. Also, Provident here in St. Louis merged with another organization. They're getting ready to do another merger. So we were sharing that in the case for support so the donors could see how they were really growing, and they were very thoughtful about doing that. And we rolled all that into the case. What's new? Sometimes it's programs, maybe there's a new renovation, you want to drop all that in. We had an organization not too long ago that didn't have a reserve, and they said we'd like to have a $250,000 reserve starter. So we put together a couple of paragraphs on that. And we were like, I don't know if that's gonna fly, I don't know if the donor's gonna wanna do that. We had 2 donors that first year that asked about that. So they're funded now. We wouldn't have put that in there initially, but it worked for them. You might have some other ideas. So anything else that's really cool that's happening at your organization. Anyone in the middle of any kind of merger or merger talks with their sister groups, anything like that? So you shake your head a little bit. Yeah, I know a lot of that was happening before. There might be some other behind the scenes things that are happening, but when you're ready to talk with, if you're going that direction, talk with donors, I would drop that into your case for support also. All right, anyone here have a 10-year impact statement? Anyone familiar with that term? Okay, so a 10-year impact, and I'll go through these examples in a second. If you were looking at where you are now, where's your organization gonna be in 10 years? Oftentimes donors will fund you right now, but the big donors will say, how are we gonna get to where you wanna go? So if you have a 10-year impact and you can tell them where you're going, oftentimes they will invest in you and make those bigger gifts. So we started doing these 10-year impact statements several years ago, and we've gotten some of the biggest gifts we've ever gotten for our organizations because people could see, not just now, but long-term, how they were gonna help their organization. Kids in the Mills from here in St. Louis, and they're very specialized. They have therapy just for children that their parents are separated or divorced, and that's all that they do. So it's the only organization here in St. Louis that does that. And they serve just a handful of folks right now. They have very deep programs, so they don't serve a whole lot of people. So they created this 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. By 2031, Kids in the Middle will provide 45,000 kids and families life-changing social and emotional skills to help families heal for the trauma of divorce. What's also running behind there is the strategic plan that goes along with that. So when they talk with their bigger donors, they share this 10-year impact, and then the donors are saying, how do you get to 45,000? How is that gonna happen? They know that's gonna happen because they're gonna have growth. They're adding more staff. Right now, they're in the middle of doing infrastructure. They're building their budget. Their budget's about $2 million right now. They're gonna have that about 3 times more. So they're sharing all of that with those donors, and it's in their case. Chance Coalition is also from here. Chance Coalition is in schools in the St. Louis area, and they work with kids in suicide prevention. And we worked with the board to figure out how we can make a dent in the suicide of kids in Missouri. And they've decided they're gonna figure out a way to change that to 50% of suicide attempts over the next 10 years. And they're gonna be working with 5 million people over those 10 years on education, where kids live, learn, and play, all right? So again, they're doing the infrastructure right now. We started working with them, they were under $1 million, they're close to $3 million right now, and they're gonna keep on growing. They're hiring more staff, they have more programs, more schools. They almost doubled the number of kids they were serving. They're about 35,000. Last year was 60,000, this year about 80,000 in the schools around here. So it's really making a difference, and they're going outside of St. Louis City and County. And then I dropped in ours at the bottom, because we had to have one too. We can't talk about it if we don't have one at our office. And by 2032, we're going to be training 100,000 nonprofit leaders and harnessing the power of 100 influential partners to change the sector and realize the potential of philanthropy. And we are in the middle of doing that right now. So check in with us in about 9 years. We'll tell you where we are. All right. So if you've got anything cool like that, drop it in, because that's going to help in your case for support and help in those big asks for your donors. All right. Any questions about that before I get into some other nuts and bolts? Go ahead.
Just some concerns, but how aspirational are there and what happens if you don't meet it? And then 2, I don't know if other congregations have this issue, but there's just the leadership changes every 6 years for us, and so that plan could just be changed by the
It could
next
be.
administration.
Yeah, well, and for you, you might have to change it, maybe it's not 10 years, it might be a 6-year or what have you, and then there's something that you work towards for 6 years, so you might have to adapt some of that. But donors will follow you along. If they love to fund what you're doing now, but if they can see where you're going and how it's gonna impact the community, they'll follow you along and make those big gifts. Yeah, absolutely. So you might have to tweak some of that based on your own organization and how you're growing, or maybe you're not growing, maybe some of your services are gonna be internal, they're gonna be external, helping in programs, that sort of thing. So you have to figure that piece out, right? Okay? All right, so this is actually how you do a case for support. So if you've never done a case for support, the fundraiser typically writes the case for support, but we need help with the marketing communications person. We try to come up with a cool concept or theme, great opening as you're reading through there. This is an internal document, but lots of people are gonna be pulling information out of there, so we like something that really grabs in the beginning. Of course, that mission, vision, values, we call those we believes with the values. If you've got a 10-year impact. History, sometimes I laugh about this because we get pages and pages of history from clients all the time. People appreciate what you've done, but they're looking at what you're doing now and in the future. So don't bog down everyone with all tons of history, just some highlights on that. Some client profiles, the problem that you're solving, what you're doing in the community is really important. They want to know how they're actually impacting. People are giving to you because you're helping other people and you're doing what they can't do, so they want to understand that. So I will put some statistics in the case as well, maybe some pull quotes, things that are standouts, some other photos, that sort of thing. I try to write at the 6th, 7th, 8th grade level. As you know, that's hard, right? Especially if you've got an organization that's anything but legal or some of these other terms. It's hard to get down to the 6th, 7th, 8th grade level, but we certainly try. I did write something the other day at 4th grade level. That was hard. That was really hard. I could not believe it, but I always run it through. Everyone run that through? You guys know how to do that, right? Run it through and see your grade level, right? Is it urgent? So give some backup. I like to use infographics. We've got some creative people in here. I'm sure you're using infographics all the time. So I dropped this into the case as well. All right, just a couple of notes on this section. Once we talk about the problem, we want to talk about the solution and how you are the solution. So we want to share those outcomes, the results, the community impact, the specific number of people that are impacted. I don't say approximately 200 sisters. I say 197 sisters that are teaching 20,172 kids. I'm very specific in the numbers, so try to pull that out. How are you getting the job done? Hopefully there's some data that you can pull from that. We were at a case session just yesterday with a client here in St. Louis who works with women that are just released from prison. And at the end of the day, we were talking about the objections. And the first thing they said to me is, why do we have to talk about the objections? Why do you think we do that in the case? So we have answers, so everyone's saying the same thing, okay? So don't be afraid to have that conversation. You might be surprised at what you hear people in the community are saying or internally, so try to get that all out on the table. Your unique selling proposition, I'm sure all of you know what that is, so want to make sure you know what that is. Your competitors. I know we don't like to think that in nonprofit world or religious world there's competitors, but there certainly are. It's a little different, it's not Nike and Reebok, but there's still some kind of competitors. But you have to figure out what your secret sauce is. So in the case, I'll talk a little bit about that. I won't ever mention another organization or why I think the program is stronger with who I'm working with, but you got to roll some of that in as well. Your case also, I usually drop it at the tail end, a summary of different financial ways that they can help, and also some other volunteer opportunities or other ways people can be involved. And then we call this PSO, problem, solution equals the funding opportunity. So every section has pieces like that. So here's the problem that's out in the world. We have the solution, and this dollar amount is how you can help with that solution. So that's how I think of it, the PSO. Sometimes people will, when we write cases, they hand them back to us, especially those PhD folks. I always love those. PhD folks. I now give people a page that says how to read the case statement, because otherwise they send it back to me with all this red. And they're like, you're writing too low, or you're using ellipses or exclamation points. Well, we do that on purpose, all right? So the lower it's written, the more it stays in your heart and not in your head. So the moment you get it, people just thinking, you've lost that emotion, and that's why people give. So remember, it's emotional writing. We have to be careful about that because we don't want to sensationalize any of the work we're doing. Someone called it poverty porn to me not too long ago, which I hate that term. I think that's an awful term, but we certainly don't want to do that to anyone. But it's not a term paper, there should be a motion in there. All right, after I write a case for support, I always throw this up next to the case. Everyone probably knows what this is, hierarchy of needs, right? I try to figure out where I am on this. Many of you are probably at the lower levels. The top level is self-actualization, that oneness with God, retreat centers and that sort of thing. Sometimes that's hard to raise money for those sort of things. But if you're at the lower levels, people tend to give you money all the time, all right? What do they always say? Kids and puppies, food, shelter, water, those sort of things, those are easy for people to understand and get to. Safety, you know, if you have domestic violence or food insecurity, those sort of things, those are really important. So I lay that right next to my case for support and then try to figure out where I am. And I always try to get down lower on the pyramid. These are actual titles and themes we've used. When we write a case, we write them all from scratch. We're literally looking at a blank sheet on the screen. There's no copy and paste because everyone's so different. This is Provident Behavioral Health, Navigating to Hope. I mentioned earlier, they answer all the suicide hotlines. And one of the things they realize is when they can navigate people to hope, even for a short amount of time, they can save lives. Ready Readers, it's a great organization here in St. Louis. They have over 400 volunteers that every single week read to 10,000 kids in the classroom. Isn't that incredible? 400 volunteers. And Read Me a Story came up because a colleague and I were talking about when your kids are little, they work with kids from 0 to kindergarten. What do the kids do at the end of the night? They bring you a book, and what do they say? Read me a story, right? So that's where that one came from. Girls in the Know is also local. They work with preteen girls. Preteen girls hear a lot of things, a lot of negative. You're not this, you're not that. You don't have the right clothes, not the right school, whatever it might be. And we just flipped that. We flipped it and said, I am enough. So they have a whole chant now that goes along with that. What I am is enough, who I am is enough, I am enough. And they have these programs in the schools and in the community, and they have a chant that goes, they have buttons, they have shirts, they have all the stuff that went along with that. Kids in the Middle is Still My Family. That's that group that works with kids in divorced families. Marion Middle School, Light Her Way. Marion Middle School is here in St. Louis. The name is actually a little deceiving. You might think it's just a middle school, it's not. They actually work with people, with girls through high school, into college, and into their career. So it's really a 12 plus years of working with them. And a lot of them come from very negative backgrounds and really struggles, but we had to flip that because we didn't want to talk about that. We wanted to talk about where they were going. And some of these girls have gone amazing places. So we had a lot of light ideas in there. So that's where that one came from. I'm going to show you one of their giving club in a second. Guardian Angel Sentiment is here also. They have a lot of programs for people on the south side here. The Path to Possible. Pathways to Independence, You Belong Here. They work with people with disabilities, a lot of mental disabilities and that sort of thing. And they do a lot of social programs, and a lot of the people they serve can't do the other things. They can't do the long bike rides. They can't go swimming. They can't go fishing. They can't do all these other things. So they have these social programs that make sure they have a place to do that. So we kept hearing from the participants that we were looking for a place to belong. So that's what their case became. Sisters of St. Joseph, this was years ago. They've been here around St. Louis for over 200 years. And if you've ever anyone been to the Mother House in Minnesota? It's pretty incredible, right? And they have this lace, and they talk about weaving sacred threads, so we picked that up in their case for support and wove that throughout, that imagery throughout. They also have some cool images, because that's how the sisters came here and made a living for all these years and that sort of thing, so we wove that together. But they're a great organization. All right, so find something that really speaks to you, and then that's usually the theme for the next 2 to 3 years, for not just the development, but for the whole outcome, wherever you are. All right, this is just an example. I pulled this from one of my groups here in St. Louis. They work with women with substance use disorder. Their name of their case is The Courage to Knock. They work out of this ginormous building in the Central West End, and to get to those doors, it's got Gothic doors, big heavy doors, and when you look at it, you're like, that might be a little scary to get up to those doors, right? The women that come to them are moms, and what's the number one reason why moms don't get help when they have substance use disorder? They don't want to leave their kids behind, right? So we turned that around, said The Courage to Knock, and what the courage it took for the moms to get to those doors, all right? Because those are heavy doors. Once they get through the doors, they're taken care of. So they not only do they have a place in the Central West End, they have homes around the St. Louis community. So this is one of their homes. They had a bunch of funding already done, so we mentioned that in their case for support. We told them the total amount, that's the real amount with all the overhead, that's not made up. We had a whole list of how we came up with that. So if donors asked, we could show them exactly what that was. So just over $1 million, 83% was already funded through grants, through government, through fee-for-service, all of that. The numbers came all from their case for support. Here's another example. This is from Ready Readers. I mentioned a moment ago, they're the ones with the 400 volunteers that read to the kids. These are the real amounts. This is right for their budget. So we took everything apart and put it back together. One classroom, once a week, it's $95.28 per child per year. So when we talk with donors, knowing where their giving levels are, if they're about a $50 donor, we're probably going to ask for $95.28. If they've been giving $1,000, we might say, hey, you want to support 12 kids. All right, so that's how we use those numbers and just do the simple math. They also have other programs, Beyond Books, Pen Pals, book bundles, all these other things. So knowing what the donors like, these are real numbers, we just do the simple math, and those are the numbers that we talk to the donors about. Even this bookworm gift box, they have a really cute bookworm icon that they use. And these teachers just need a few moments sometimes in the day when they're working with little kids, and this gives the kids little hands-on things. And it was only $21.90. They were giving all of those away, and then we started selling those to the donors. It just made some sense. So now all of those are paid for every year. So it's kind of cool that that happened like that. All right, so someone just had a question about how to use it. We've got in key materials, you can see the brochures, the annual reports, direct mail, online campaigns. Is anyone doing online campaigns? No? Oh my gosh, we've done so many of those. We've raised millions of dollars in the past couple of years, even before COVID. Oh, if you're interested in it, talk to me afterwards. I'll give you a couple of platforms that work really well. Mid-level giving, major donors, website, social media, anywhere you need copy. Because once it's written and it's approved, you don't have to rewrite anything. Every time you need something, just go back to your case for support and pull that information out. Okay? All right, this is just another example of from one of our clients. We had different programs, what it cost, the actual amounts. You can see those are real amounts. Those are amounts we made up. Those are the real wonky numbers. And again, when people say, how did you get to that? We can show them the formula if they want it. If there was no real numbers. We didn't just make this up because we thought those would be cool numbers, 5376, No, they're real things with the overhead smashed down. All right, I know this is really hard to see, but this is the second page of Family Forward, which is one of our groups here in St. Louis. And I think you're all going to get a copy of this so you can see it a little bit easier when you get back home. But this is the second page, and it tells a story. When we were working with Family Forward, we're still working with them, they had hit a wall. They couldn't go any further with their fundraising. They were just struggling to tell their story. So we had a whole case session with them. 1,000-mile journey ended up as their theme that ran throughout. And they were trying to explain what they do and what it's like to work with the kids that they're with all the time. And this is what I liked. When they tried to explain it, at first someone went down so deep to explain it, we were like, donors are never going to understand that, and it's just going to take too long to explain. And then one of the therapists said, imagine a path, and there's rocks in the path, and then there's logs, and then you got little kids, and then you got a pebble in your shoe. And now imagine what that's like every day for a child. And we were like, got it. Okay, that's why it's this whole journey. So we rolled all that into this language here, and there's some lovely language in here about tiny gravel constantly at the bottom of their shoes, tree limbs littering the way, some large, some broken pieces, all right? So we're painting some pictures, we're going along the way. And then it continues on, so we're telling the story without going too deep, because we have to be careful about that. We don't want to sensationalize the horrible things that have happened to the kids, but we want to tell enough of the story so people go, oh, we kind of get it, all right? Does that make some sense? All right, Marion Middle School, I mentioned them a moment ago. Their case for support was called Light Her Way. And the first meeting I had with Mary Elizabeth Grimes, anyone know her, Mary Elizabeth? Oh, she's fantastic. If you have not met her, you should. She's fantastic. The very first meeting I had with her, she said, I don't want to focus on where the girls are coming from, I want to focus on where they're going and the path that they're going. So that's how the whole Light Her Way piece came up. This is one of the panels from their mid-level giving program, and it's called the Starlight Club. So that's picking up the Light Her Way. And there's some good language in here. They have what they call a care trio. at the school to make sure the girls are taken care of every single day. So it's a three-member social, three professional members, social, emotional, mental health, and wraparound services for every Marion girl. Every Marion girl gets that every single day. And then if they need help outside, they get help outside, and if their families need help, they also get help. All right, so this was our mid-level giving program. We have different dollar amounts at the different levels. People could sponsor the girls for a year, 6 months, or however they wanted to do that. So we had a whole chart with that. And then we pulled out some quotes from the case. On average, there's an 11-year gap between seeking treatment for mental health concerns and an original crisis. And for us, that sounded crazy. We were talking about middle school girls. So if they're in 6th grade and they don't get help for 11 years, whew, that just hit us wrong, right? And that's a real stat. We didn't just make that up. That came from some research. So we thought if we could take care of them now, maybe they could go even further. All right. So there's some really good language in that one as well. This is part of Family Forwards. They have a Compass Club, so they're the ones with the 1,000-mile journey. So we rolled that into their Compass Club. You can see their giving levels here. They do a lot of assessments for kids, so we took it right out of their case for support. Monthly, $57 up here, annually $684. They had a bunch of mid-level giving donors that they didn't know what to do with. A bunch of people that were giving $1,000 year over year. So when we looked at these numbers, we said, oh, are there some $1,000 donors that can go to $1,368? Probably, that's not a big jump. But we had to give them a reason to go that direction. We actually started having people that jumped up to these levels as well. Their top level is at $54.72. Their major donor level is roughly the $5,000 and up gifts. So that's why we stayed, between $684 up to a little over $5,000. But there's some really good information up there as well. Not sensationalizing, just talking about the kids and how they can help. The first thing they do is always the assessment. Assess the kids and figure out how they can move them forward. That's the first thing, okay? So I don't know about you, $57 for one kid, I do that in a heartbeat, no? All right, here's the girls in the know. I love the way this looks. Everything they had originally was almost like clip art or something, if you can believe it. That's what it still felt like. So we completely redid all of their materials. That's where the black and pink came from. For $76 a day, you can pay for one girl to go through these programs. They initially were talking to folks about a $125 gift, and when we did the numbers in the case, it was $279. So every time they asked for $125, they were not paying for a girl. And then they were freaked out that we were going to go back to donors that asked for $279. Almost every single one of them said yes, all right, because they could see how they were actually helping, all right. We did pull a couple other quotes in here. Every 7 seconds a girl was bullied. It just happened while you read this. So those were just pull quotes in the case. 5 out of 7 girls will engage in cutting, eating disorders, and/or drugs. So we pulled some things just so people could see how deep some of these issues go, but again, we didn't sensationalize on any of that. But this all came out of their case for support. This is just one more. This is Providence. They're the ones that are navigating to hope. The look and feel is much different. It's because everything they do has this look and feel, so we didn't have a whole lot of leeway. Sometimes we run into that with education institutions or hospitals, so we had to follow in their guidelines. They have someone over there that's worked for them for years. Her name is Bailey, and she's amazing. She keeps stats on everything. So when we went back to Bailey, talking about their hotline programs, she could easily pull out, one of the stats she keeps is how many lives they save annually. So that's what this last column is right here. So you can help sponsor for $34 a month, $408, and you save 36 lives. That's real data that they track every single year, and they update every single year. The numbers are actually much larger than when we originally created this. And we funded this whole crisis worker education and training program for a whole year through the mid-level giving program. We actually had donors that said, I was gonna do 408, and then I saw I could help save 73 lives, and I was like, yes, I'll do it. So people upgraded even more, okay? So those are just a couple of examples of how we use the case. I know we're not gonna have time for this, but back at Let's Build Hope, we talk a lot about not to-dos, we talk about you-dos. Because sometimes people, if you do a to-do, people are like, oh, I'll put it on my list, I'll do it later. But a you-do is you actually doing something. And we believe that we all have to actually do things to move the needle. So when you go back, think about if you've got a written case for support, why are you worthy of donor support? How are you different from other organizations? And then think about some titles or other themes that you can roll throughout. I just want to throw this up here. You might have something similar right now. After we do case for support, we always do annual planning sessions and come up with something similar to this. This is actually from a real client here in St. Louis. They were raising about $800,000 the previous year. We got them up past 1.5 million, and that's how we did it. All the different solicitation methods, we gross, expense, net, CWR, fund, all those sort of things. So again, if you're not doing some projections right now, talk to me. We'll help you figure out how to do that. Again, I didn't know there was a system to do that when I started in fundraising, and people would say, well, you just have to raise 10% more, or 5% more. But do you have enough donors, or are you at max and you need to have more donors? You know, so there's ways around that. So that just gives you a snapshot of a budget outline. The other thing that we think is really important is having monthly projections. That's at active fundraising, because if I know I've got to raise in July $121,500, I am moving. I am moving all the time, all right? If it's more nebulous, I may not hit those numbers because I don't have anything to motivate me. So we put together monthly projections. Again, if you're not doing that right now, you might want to consider that. That helps move the needle as well. We also have something we created called Keep Your Job Tool, because I've been a fundraiser for over 25 years, and what happens if I don't hit the number? I'm getting fired. Someone's getting fired, right? Not the marketing people, not the leadership people, the fundraisers are getting fired. So we created this tool called Keep Your Job Tool so we can stay on task. And every single month, we look at what the projection was, what we actually got in, what the difference is, how far we are to goal, how much came in, and if we're ahead or behind. Again, this is a real one from a client. I just snatched it and dropped it in here. And we were huffing, because they were around $800,000, and we had a big number to hit. We could see in their data that they had the donors. We just had to figure out how to get to them. But they were just over, a little over $6,000 over that goal. We were hoofing it. June 30th, it was a long run. Yeah, they're over $3 million now, so it's amazing how far they've come. All right, just want to mention real quick about leadership teams. I know we're almost out of time. We need our leadership teams. What do you have? Boards, development committees, whatever you might have at your organization. Governance and fundraising, always their two top priorities. People always know the governance, they don't always know the fundraising part, but that's the other piece. Two main pieces. So we need them to tell us where they're going, oversight of principles, practices, fiduciary responsibility, also to open doors as much as possible. Even if your leadership team is all religious, we still need them to help us with that sort of thing. That's a fundraising piece, and tell us what they're hearing out in the community. Lots and lots of different ways of getting involved. Sometimes people think, oh, well, you're just going to ask me for money and ask for all my friends. That's not what this is, you know. But having people open the door for us will help. Always asking for a meaningful gift. I know that's a little different with the religious sometimes because they don't have their own money, depending on what organizations they're in. But especially if you've got people in the community that are part, they should be supporting you. Sometimes you hear they'll say, well, I'm volunteering, that's my gift. Yeah, it's nice, but also people are going to be asking, you know, if someone's going to make a big gift and people that are close to you aren't giving, they're going to question that. So we have to be careful. And if they're not willing to give their own gifts, I'd ask, why? Maybe there's something wrong, they're upset, they're not happy with us, so we need to figure that sort of thing out. All right, so we started this by asking about fundraising, and someone said it's about relationships, and you're absolutely right. It's always the relationships, it's not transactional. You know, you give us $50 and we do X for you. I'd be careful about that. It's always about the donor, what they want to make sure, what their life mission is and what your mission is and how that intersects. I always try to keep in mind, not every donor is our donor. I just had that yesterday with my organization I was with, and there's a really wealthy gentleman here in St. Louis, and they're like, we really want to meet him. We think he'll really like us. He's not going to give to them. He doesn't know them. He doesn't have a relationship with them. He does give millions of dollars, but they're starting from zero. And I also know what he gives to, and it's not going to be their organization. So every donor is not your donor. I call that bless and release. Anyone else do that? Yeah. I do. I literally go bless and release. Yeah. So I've learned that over time because, you know, years ago I was like, no, they're going to be my donor. I'm going to figure it out. Nope. Don't worry about that. Bless and release them. If they love something else more than your organization, bless them and release them. Let them go on. All right. Make sure you're finding the connection between what you do and what a donor wants, and all of that comes from telling your story really well. All right, so I know we only have a few more minutes, so what questions do you have? And again, I think they sent out the presentation so you can see all the detail in there. What questions do you have? You feel like you're telling your stories really well now? Donors get it, people in the community get it? Oh, I see you're shaking your head, no. Go
I
ahead.
feel like we tell our stories well when we do a newsletter, when we have like this, you know, we have like a lot of space to tell the story, and we can tell different stories. But when we're just doing like an appeal letter, like, okay, All Souls Day is coming up, like, into this, like, I don't feel like we're telling a story well for our appeal letters.
Oh, I've written a bunch of those for All Souls Day.
Yeah.
People love All Souls Day.
Yeah, and I mean, it's basically just like you have a loved one that's sick and you want the sisters to pray for them, that's why people give, but we're not really telling a story behind it.
Yeah, so sometimes, you know, I look at my own heart and I'm like, if I'm gonna give to this, what's gonna pull me in? And for All Souls Day, like my mom died when I was a kid, so I think All Souls Day, I think about that.
Yeah.
So I might write it from that perspective, I'm not giving out all kinds of information about, you know, that, but I write it from that perspective, so if I'm in the right headspace, I can get there. So you might be able to take a story, maybe there's some sisters, or I'm not sure who you work with, but maybe there's some other sisters that have passed away and one started a ministry and you want to remember her, you know, so it's a little bit of a story about that, you know, something like that. Yeah, I've written a bunch of those through the years. People love All Souls Day. I know, it is coming out.
Yeah, we raise a lot of money.
Yeah. What about everyone else? Go ahead.
As our sisters are aging and ministries and those actual tactical things of what we can do are also getting smaller. And so I think that's a big challenge too, right? To say, support us in retirement, or, you know, like, so it's really, there's not much of that mission focus available.
Yeah, I've written a lot of those through the years too. So it may not be right now what they're doing. It might be if they started a ministry, or some of them have started universities, or really impactful ministries. Even the group I was with yesterday was started originally by some nuns here in St. Louis. They're no longer affiliated, but they still talk about them, and because that was really important. They're not religious anymore, but you know, talking about that legacy and how many people have been helped since that was started, because that's very visionary. A lot of the sisters have started incredible things through the years. You know, and I think I was born and raised in St. Louis, and I'm Catholic, so I'm always thinking about how I can give back to people that helped me. The Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus have Coriezu High School here at Sacred Heart Villa, and they work at St. Ambrose and here. They also have ministries in Connecticut and other places. But anytime they ask me for money, I'm always going to give them money, because they taught my kids when they were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old at Sacred Heart Villa. And so they learned a lot about what it's like to give back, and their first classes in religion were with the sisters, you know, and they still have those memories. And we still are in touch with a lot of them. So it helps to have keep those connections going, yeah. So you might have to just find kind of those threads and how to weave that through, yeah. What about everyone else? Go ahead.
A downturn in the economy, how can you make that better for the sisters?
I just talk about the impact, yeah. I try to stay away from any of the, I don't know, kind of yuck stuff, like, because then people think it's like Debbie Downer stuff, you know, so I try to stay away from any of that kind of thing. But I talk about what they are doing, the impact they are having, you know, because they haven't stopped doing what they're doing. Even if the economy's changed, people are still getting help, people still need help, so I talk about that sort of thing, yeah. What about everyone else? Any other questions? Go ahead.
This isn't actually a question, but I was very glad that when you said you didn't sensationalize the needs of the people in that sense. I've done fundraising for our missions out of the country. And what I always try to do is explain how great the people are and what they're doing themselves to move it forward. So it's not just you're standing there with your hand out, right, please give. And so, you know, present them as people. And people with families, and people who are struggling, but who are going to struggle together to get water in their neighborhood, or whatever it is. I think that's a real positive way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm even cautious about sharing photos. We've worked with lots of groups that are overseas and in ministries and things like that. I'm even careful about that, because I don't want, it doesn't always feel good. You know, like, here, this person's standing with this person and we're really helping. That doesn't feel natural. I'd like to share a little bit about the story and the impact we're having. Like the Franciscan friars here in St. Louis, they're drilling wells in some countries right now, so we talk about what that's actually going to do for those communities that don't have water and how much they're walking half the day to get water back and forth. So imagine that. So that's what I always think. If I had to do that every day and get water for my family and come back every day, what else can I get done in a day? You know, so if they're drilling and they have water and there are videos of the water coming up the first time, the kids dancing around and stuff, I'm like, that completely changes people's lives right there. So I always try to think of what's changing lives or saving lives, and that's the thing I want to highlight, right? But you're right, we have to be careful about that. You know, that poverty point is someone called it a while back. Yeah, I know, it's a horrible name. Yeah, makes me cringe. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I think they're going to send all this stuff out, so you'll have my information. But thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I hope you have a good conference.